This video is a continuation of Comenius Plants Part 1b, Trees. Mespila sunt lanuginosa, Pura succulenta, Pruna damascena, Armeniaca, Persica, Cadena ossiculata sunt. Ta mespila cnoode, ta apia opode, ta damascena, Armeniaca, Persica, Cocumela ostode, e pyrenode. You can clearly see the downy or lanuginous surface on this medlar. If you saw our praefatio on Theophrastus in the flower, you'll recall Theophrastus had a category of apetalous flowers he called ta anthe cnoode. If your interest in plants is more literary than scientific, you may know or want to know this passage from the first scene in Act 2 of Romeo and Juliet, when Benvolio and Mercutio are looking for Romeo in Capulet's orchard at night. Come, he hath hid himself among these trees, to be consorted with the humorous night. Blind is his love, and best befits the dark. If love be blind, love cannot hit the mark. Now will he sit under a medlar tree, and wish his mistress were that kind of fruit as maids call medlars when they laugh alone. O Romeo, that she were, oh that she were, an open arse, and thou a poprin pear. Comenius calls pears succulent, meaning juicy. Indeed, botanists today classify fleshy fruits as those with a succulent pericarp. However, don't confuse succulent fruits and their succulent pericarps with the stem succulents, plants with fleshy stems, such as cacti. Prunus is the genus of stone fruits. Botanists call the stone or pit the ossiculum if they prefer Latin, or pyrene from Greek ho pyrein if they prefer Greek. The pyrene of this Prunus persica is dissected to reveal the seed. Don't confuse the two. Pruna cadena are wax plums from Latin cera for wax. The wax plum found in Pliny and Virgil is thought to be the Mirabelle plum, especially associated with the Lorraine region in France. I'm not sure the Greeks had a word for or knew of this particular subspecies, but in any case we've translated it with kokumelon, the Greek word for Linnaeus's type species for the Prunus domestica or plum. The ancients tell us the peach came from Persia, to melon persicon. The Romans called it that, and from persica came Old French pêche and then our English peach. To melon armeniacon, our apricot, was obviously thought to have come to the west from ancient Armenia. For the intriguing etymology of our name apricot, I've simply pasted in the article from the online etymology dictionary. A few sentences ago, Comenius taught us that some fruits are praecoces, some serotini. The word apricot probably goes back to Latin prunum or malum praecoquum. Its proposed evolution from malum praecoquum to Byzantine Greek, to Arabic, to early Romance languages, to our apricot, makes for an entire book of history. And our damson, of course, comes from the Latin damascenum, to melon damascenon. Putamen amoeat, et nucem si casa non est, nuci frangibulo frangat oportet, qui nucleum esse vult. Sive sit juglans, sive avelana, quam fert corolus, sive tribulus, sive amugdalum. To kelupos ap aereto, kai to caruon traueto me diakonon ho tu Pyrenos epiemenos. eta karuon basilikon, eta to karuon ho he karua pere, eta tribolos, eta amygdale estin. Qui nucleum esse vult, ho tu pyrenos epiemenos. This sentence is about edible nuts, but are the 4 examples all nuts? What is a nut? A nut is a type of fruit, but what are the different types of fruit botanically speaking? A few sentences ago, we set ourselves up to answer this by first defining what a fruit itself is, botanically speaking. Recall that a fruit is the mature ovary wall or pericarp of flowering plants, the seeds grown from the ovary's ovules, and, if present, tissue from non-ovarian accessory parts. Fruit types are based primarily on how the phlos pushes out the fructum, in Comenius's words, that is, on fruit development, of which there are 3 kinds. In simple development, the fruit is derived from a single pistil of a single flower. In aggregate development, the fruit is derived from multiple pistils of the same flower. An example is the blackberry, represented by figures ABC in the diagram to the right. In multiple development, the fruit is derived from many flowers coalescing. An example is the mulberry, represented by figures DEF. In aggregate and multiple development, the component coming from an individual pistil is called a unit fruit. Simple fruit types, as well as unit fruit types, are based on a number of criteria. The primary criterion is whether the fruit at maturity is fleshy or succulent, or dry. Of the major fleshy fruit types, we've already seen several plums, the apple, the pear, the medlar, and several drupes or stone fruits, cherries, plums, olives, damsons, apricots, peaches, and mirabelle plums. We're going to see Hesperidia shortly, and in other units, berries and peppos. Dry fruits are for the most part classified in turn as indehiscent or dehiscent, based on whether they split open at maturity to disperse their seeds. Finally, our definition of a nut. The nut is one type of dry, indehiscent fruit. As an aside, you may notice, if you're really paying attention, that the achene shows up as both a dry and a fleshy type in these diagrams. Like the nut, an achene is a dry, in its case single-seeded, indehiscent fruit. The unit fruit of a sunflower, for example, is an achene. Now, a strawberry is an aggregate fruit of achenes. However, it is an accessory fruit. Its achenes are on the surface of the enlarged fleshy tissue of the flower's receptacle or torus. Hence, a little misleadingly, the strawberry also shows up in these diagrams among the fleshy fruit types. So back to the 4 edible nuts in Comenius' sentence. Which are actually nuts botanically defined? The Juglans regia or walnut? No. Well, it is a nut, but the nut is surrounded by a fleshy, indehiscent plant part that had been a whorl of bracts subtending the flower, called an involucre. Because of this fleshy accessory part, the walnut is a drupaceous nut classified by botanists as a pseudodrupe. By the way, you may know that the Latin word juglans is formed from Jovis glans, Jove's testicle. The Greeks had the same idea, dios balanos. But be aware that Jove's testicle is the walnut. Zeus's testicle is the sweet chestnut. Is the Corylus awellana or hazelnut a true nut? Yes. The hazelnut is a dry, in its case one-seeded, indehiscent fruit with a hard pericarp, the very definition of a nut. How about the trapanatans, the water caltrop, or water chestnut? No. Well, yes, no, maybe. The water chestnut is a fruit containing a single large, starchy, pretty cool-looking edible seed that many websites describe as being a nut or nut-like. In Comenius's day and into the 19th century, it was a popular item sold by street vendors. But in my textbook for plant systematics, Michael Simpson describes the different fruits of the Lythraceae family as capsules, berries, or drupe-like, and he gives the fruit of the Tropinatans species as an example of drupe-like. By the way, tribulos for the Greeks and Romans was their name both for the water caltrop and the caltrop placed on the ground to trip up the enemy's cavalry or elephants. Finally, what about the almond? Notice that the almond is in the genus Prunus, the genus of drupes, so by definition, not a nut. The almond is a drupe, but instead of a fleshy exocarp like plums and cherries, it has a thick, leathery coat called the hull, and inside the hull, a hard, woody, corrugated shell, which is the endocarp. And inside the shell, once removed by you or your grocer, the edible seed we indeed usually call a nut. Suber et ilex glandes, quercus etiam galas, castanaas echinatis operculis convestitas, pinus strobilos, cornus corna, laurus, acer, et sorbus bacas ferunt. Ho pelos kai smilax balanus, druste kai kecidas, hedios balanos carua castanaica pogoni lopismatos kecalumena, pelce strobilus, cranea, dapne, spendamnos, oa acrodrua pue. Pliny generally uses bacca for berries or drupes, usually those with firm flesh like cherries, plums, olives. But he also uses it for cones and nut casings that resemble berries. The juniper berry, which is actually a seed cone but berry-like in appearance, the cone of the Mediterranean cypress, round like a berry, and the nut cupule of the beech. Bacca has for a long time been translated into English by our Proto-Germanic word berry, for example in John Ankeren's 1631 English translation of the Yanoah. In our everyday language, a berry is a juicy, round, edible fruit without a pit. Its botanical definition is more particular and encompasses not only, for example, the grape, but also the tomato. Whatever a bacca or a berry is acrodrua a good translation? Actually, ancient Greek had no equivalent word. Our translators acrodrua, which literally means fruits grown on upper branches of trees, was used especially for hard-shelled fruits like nuts. For example, in this prescription from Hippocrates' Peripathon, Affections, distinguishing the soft fruits of the fall harvest from the acrodrua. Opore kai acrodrua diatoda metatos etian alupoterasti kai hygiainonti kai asteneonti hoti. As translated in the Loeb edition, fruits and nuts are less injurious after the meal in both the healthy and the sick for the following reason that ... Acrodrua was regarded as either synonymous with or closely related to carua. Synonymous, according to the banqueters in Athenaeus' Deipnosophistae from the 3rd century CE. Hoi atikoi kai hoi aloi sungrapes koinos panta ta acrodrua carua legusin. distinct, based on this observation from Theophrastus, not from his botanical masterpiece Periputon Historia, but from his amusing book of 30 character sketches called Ethikoi Caracteres on moral characters. Here from his sketch of Hob Deluros, the obnoxious type, Kai pletuses tes agoras pros elton hob deluros pros ta carua eta myrte eta acrodrua hestekos trage matis destai hamatoi polunti pros lalon. As translated in the Loeb edition, when the agora is crowded, he goes to the stands for walnuts, myrtle berries, and fruits, and stands there nibbling on them while talking with the vendor. For berries, the Greeks often simply used the generic word karpos and its derivatives. For example, el karpeo can mean full of berries. Also, there is often a word for the berries of particular plants. For example, hokokos, the gall of Kermes oak, arkeltis and he kedris for juniper berries, he dapnis, bayberry, to'oon, service tree berry, he skinis, berry of the skinos, the mastic, tomoron, the black mulberry as well as the blackberry, berry in modern Greek is muro, and rax meant grape. In fact, we could retranslate the end of this Comenian sentence as Dapne dapnidas, spendamnos karpon, oa ua pue. Comenius says sweet chestnut trees bear chestnuts that are wrapped in a prickly covering like the spines of a hedgehog, what we call the nut's spiky cupule. Castanaa castanaas echinatis operculis convestitas ferunt. The Greek translator renders this as pogoni lopismatos kekalumena, covered in, well, literally, a beard of appealing. After reviewing this video, I was questioning whether the word should be lopismatos, as I found it in the Greek translation, or lepismatos, perhaps recalling this from an earlier sentence about trees in Comenius. Entosta leposistin, ho chlorinomenon hoiontesti lepisdestai, intrinsecus liber est quidum virid glubi potest. After a close inspection of Liddell and Scott, I see there are many lop and lep words cognate with or derived from to lepos, in some cases as variant readings in our manuscripts, but in hindsight I should have made this lepismatos. The problem in turn with lepisma is that in all the citations given, it refers to the peel of bark, not to the cupule or hull or rind or shell of a fruit. From Genesis, elabeda heautoi Jacob rabdon stira kinen kai karuinen kai platanu kai elepisen autas Jacob lepismata leuka perisiron to chloron. And Jacob took to himself green rods of storax tree and walnut and plane, and Jacob peeled in them white stripes, tearing off the green. From Dioscorides on an unidentified plant from India, naskapthon, kai tuto ectes indices comisdetai, esti de ploiodes, sucaminu lepismati et oikos. It is like rind or bast, resembling the bark of the mulberry tree. And Galen gives it as a definition of ictuemata, lepismata ploion, the peels of barks. Our Greek translator did have other options. To match Comenius's echinatus, he might simply have availed himself of the matching Greek adjective echinodes and written karua kastanaika echinode pue. Or better yet, he might have consulted Theophrastus on the beech nut. Hodekarpos tes oxues leos balanodes in echinoi plain an acanthoi kai leoi kai ukhos he dios balanos acanthode. The fruit of the beech is smooth like an acorn, enclosed in a shell, which is, however, without prickles and smooth, not spinous like the chestnut. Then he could have simply, and with good sourcing, have written Karua kastanai ka akanthode pue, notwithstanding the fact that our beechnut at least is acanthodes, not leos and anacanthos. And please proceed to the next video in the playlist for Comenius, Plants, Trees, Part 1b.